Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Apologize for today's podcast this morning. We could not get the YouTube live up, but we are here now. Today we are going to do a podcast or a quick Q&A. Just me here. You got me all to yourself, guys, on ketosis, a nice little Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free and let me know. We're going to do functional medicine on demand. So we're going to go through and riff on this topic of ketosis, which is so important. So we're going to dive into some of the benefits of ketosis. We're going to talk about how it can help even reverse and reduce your risk of certain diseases. We're going to talk about how to do ketosis the right and wrong way. And we'll also talk about supplements that can help aid in producing more ketones. So, all right, let's dig in, guys. First off, what is ketosis? Ketosis is a natural process in which your body is burning relatively more fat for fuel. So we have these things known as like ketones, like beta hydroxybutyrate and such, acetone, acetate, and our body can utilize these ketones for fuel in our brains, which is pretty awesome. Now, we only need about 20 grams of glucose per day for our brain. So we don't need a lot. So even if you didn't eat any carbohydrate at all, we could pretty much survive off that 20 grams with, for the most part, protein, because our body can bring and do something called gluconeogenesis, which means gluco, new, genesis, forming or creating. So forming or creating new glucose out of protein. Now that process is very cortisol dependent. So if you have a lot of adrenal issues, that may be a stressor. So getting a little bit of carbohydrate in there, typically if you're in that induction kind of ketosis stage of 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate, typically is good. Usually you're going to get all that carbohydrate from non-starchy vegetables if you're going to be that low and only get 20 to 30, primarily your non-starchy veg. So your broccoli, your kale, your spinach, those are going to be the big ones. Just your non-starchy veg, your salad greens, those kind of things. And you can always add, of course, extra fat on them as well to really optimize your ketone levels, right? Because ketones come from fat. The difference is, though, we need our carbohydrates at a set level. So that level is about 20 or 30 grams of net carbs a day. And what a net carb is, it's basically taking how many carbs are in that food item. Let's say it's 10 grams of carbohydrates in a cup of broccoli, but let's say half of that is fiber. So we're going to subtract the fiber from the total carbs. And then what's left, that's the net carbs, because fiber technically is indigestible. So your body's not going to be able to take it into the bloodstream. So it's not going to cause wonkiness or any blood sugar fluctuations. So ketones are important. Now, again, if we increase insulin, what insulin does is it turns on lipogenic enzymes, meaning fat storing. Lipo means fat, genic means forming. So it's going to be forming fat. Now, you can't be forming fat and burning fat at the same time, right? Those are two opposite ends of the spectrum. That's like a diametrically opposed idea, right? So we have to have elevation in ketones, we have to have our lipolytic enzymes on, okay? Our lipolytic enzymes. Insulin's a lipogenic. Lytic means to cut or to break. So lipolytic means we're breaking down and cutting up fat and using it for fuel. Insulin, so if we do too much carbohydrate, and again, let's say we're not talking about our non-starchy veg, maybe we're talking about starch, right? Sweet potato, squash, right? Maybe excess fructose. Maybe we're doing too many fruits. Maybe we're going to the higher end of that spectrum and doing more high glycemic fruits. That's going to drive up our insulin levels, and that's going to turn on those lipogenic enzymes, right? And that's going to basically cause us to start storing fat versus burning fat. So the first thing we have to do is we have to get our insulin levels lower so we can tap into those lipolytic enzymes, growth hormone, thyroid hormone, etc., glucagon. We really want to start burning fat. So number one, getting the carbohydrates down enough. Number two, we have to get fat up. So typically, I recommend it's about 2 times the fat to 1 gram of protein is a pretty good rule of thumb. So to be in ketosis, my general recommendations are going to be keeping your carbs between 20 to 50 grams of net carbs. The more metabolically out of balance are, the longer you've been overweight, the more metabolic issues probably go closer to 20 grams of net carbohydrates. That's number one. Look at your protein and fat stores or sources. You want to choose your fat 2 times the amount of protein. Okay. Now, the only way you screw this up is if you're not adding additional fat into your diet from, like, let's say grass-fed butter, coconut oil, and you're doing lots of lean meats and protein powders. Now, it's okay. Like, I do a collagen protein in the morning, but I also add coconut oil or MCT oil, and I also add a tablespoon of butter. So I get 20 or 30 grams of protein in there, but I'm also getting about 50 to 60 grams of fat. And the carbohydrates are probably less than 3 in that meal, maybe 2. So getting the 2-to-1 ratio, 2 times the fat to 1 time the protein. Now, how you do that is avoid boneless, skinless chicken breasts, avoid like the venison, the really, really lean, the rabbit meat. Not that everyone eats that stuff, but if you go to the grocery store, right, you see 95% grass-fed beef. Try to go with the 80. Try to go with the 80. Try to make sure it's organic, because a lot of toxins are actually going to be stored in the fat of these animals. So you really want to make sure when you're going ketogenic and you're upping the fat, you're buying good quality, because high amounts of fat that you're consuming will mean potential more toxins. So we got to make sure the toxins are low by buying a high quality of fat. Okay, high quality. So 2-to-1 ratio is a really good start. It may take a few days to get you into ketosis. So the big thing that I do to supercharge that is MCT oil, because MCT oil will literally bump up your ketone levels. I've done things like Keto OS, and I've compared it to MCT oil. I actually get better results, or just as good, if not better, with the MCT oil. Plus, it's more cost effective. So I like that aspect of the MCT oil. So you can throw that in your shake. You can throw it in your coffee. Now, the ketones are great because once you get the ketones up, it has a natural appetite suppression effect. Now, that's good, because what's going to be the biggest thing that's going to take you out of the ketogenic diet? Guess, it's going to be your cravings. So the more you can knock those cravings down, then that means you're not going to be reaching for, guess what? The carbohydrate, especially the refined carbohydrate. Because remember that balance, right? We have our lipolytic and our lipogenic, right? Insulin's lipogenic. So if we're craving the starchy and the carbs, we upregulate those lipogenic enzymes, which will, again, take us out of fat burning and put us into fat storing. So super important. Getting the cravings under control is number 1. Now, things you can do to help too, blood sugar support like extra chromium and alpha lipoic acid is going to be great. Starting your day in that first half hour with a really good fat meal and protein. And I typically do 0 carbohydrate in the morning unless it's non-starchy vegetables. If I do it in the morning, I'll reach for some sauerkraut, some fermented vegetables just to feed that gut bacteria. And then I'll reach for a lot of fat and typically 20 to 30 grams of protein. Now, if you're doing a lot of exercise, you got to make sure the protein's high enough, because, if you're doing a lot of heavy lifting and you're breaking down your muscles, some people kind of go a little bit low on the protein in the ketogenic diet. So you have to make sure you dial it into your body's needs. Now, the nice thing about protein is lots of studies on this, the thermic effect of food. What this is known as, how many calories do you actually burn to access the calories in that food you eat? So if, let's say, I'm going to just use a visual analogy, it's going to be easier. So let's say I ate this much protein. My body has to use literally about 30 to 40% of the calories that are in this protein just to process it. So what that means is getting protein in your body really revs up your metabolism. Now, the thermic effect of food regarding fat and protein is much lower. So if we had this much fat or carbohydrate, it's going to be much lower. The amount of calories to access the fat or carbs is much lower, where the protein is much higher. So you really boost your metabolism up when you're eating more protein. The key is, in the ketogenic diet, if you're going to do chicken, full skin, right? Put the skin on it, right? Try to avoid the chicken breast. Not saying you can't, right? Like my wife cooked a rotisserie chicken the other night. Of course, I had the skin, but I go right to that dark meat first. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Now, regarding the ketogenic approach, typically you can go about 5 to 6 hours between meals, especially if you're getting enough calories. Make sure you are eating enough calories. People tend to naturally go low calorie on a ketogenic diet because of the fact that those ketones are highly appetite suppressing. So that's number 2. Let me just tune in and see if I have any questions here. So cycling in and out of ketosis, that's an awesome question. That's exactly where I'm going to go next. I'm a big fan of cyclical ketogenic diets. Now think about it. Evolutionarily, we never just were low carbohydrate all the time. There may have been times where we were fasting, or we had a big kill and we ate a whole bunch of meat from that buffalo or whatever it is. But then, hey, spring came, hey, look, a whole bunch of berries, right? So there was this cycling in and out. So I'm a big fan of doing cyclical ketogenic diets for sure. Keep it low carb for a few days, and then at night, pop in some extra sweet potato. Pop in a nice dessert that may be a little bit higher in carbs and relatively grain-free. So I think that's great. Every 3 or 4 nights is fine. Again, I typically keep my carbs on a daily basis between 50 to 75 grams of carbohydrate. I got my Fitbit on here on my waist, and I've already walked 6 miles today, and I haven't even had my lunch yet. So I'll typically walk about 10 to 11 miles in a day. So I burn a lot of fat because, that's a very low intense exercise. So I'm burning a lot of fat calories, relatively speaking. So I need to get a little bit more carbs in. So I do about 50 to 75, at the most 100 grams of net carbs. And my carbs come primarily at nighttime from some 80 to 90% dark chocolate, or I'll do some chocolate that's stevia sweetened. I'll also do some fresh berries, and I'll typically do it in some coconut cream or some heavy whipping cream, or I'll do a nice green Granny Smith apple, half the amount of carbohydrate and sugar. I'll put some cinnamon on it to help reset the insulin receptor sites, because cinnamon will help sensitize yourself to insulin better, so you make less insulin when you consume it. And I do the grannies and maybe a little bit of almond butter. So that's kind of my dessert. And then I'll do, relatively speaking, non-starchy veg at every meal, with the exception of maybe breakfast. So that's kind of how I do that. But cyclical keto, I'm a huge fan of it. Also, upping your calories and upping your carbs can really give you a good pop to your thyroid. I have lots of patients that have been chronically on lower carbohydrate ketogenic diets, and they start to get lower thyroid symptoms after time. So my default always is to a lower carbohydrate diet, a lower carb template, a paleo template that's on the lower carb. So I like the aspect of a template. So my template's always paleo, which just means eating foods that are anti-inflammatory, nutrient dense, and low toxin. The macros can be kind of dialed in. So depending on where most people are at, they're going to a lower carbohydrate, high fat, moderate protein diet. And then from there, we dial it in. A lot of people, they get success on a low carbohydrate paleo template, and they think that's where they should be all the time. It's the same thing that happens to vegans. They cut out all the junk food. They go and they eat lots of good plant food, and they're like, oh, wow, this is where I have to be all the time. And then 2, 3, 4 months later, they hit the wall and they don't feel as good. Right? And they get stuck, and all their other vegan friends are saying, you're not doing it right. But no, you're just hitting the wall. You got to now add in some more fats and proteins from animal products, but they don't go there. That's a whole other podcast. But going back here, if you hit that wall on that low carb paleo template, what's the next step? Increase your carbohydrate that day or that week by 5 to 10 grams. Do a quarter of a sweet potato at night, a little bit of squash at night. See how you feel. What my patients start to notice is they up maybe 5 or 10 that week, maybe 10 or 20 total in the next 2 weeks, and they start to feel a little bit warmer, a little bit more energized. Feel that out for you, customize it to you. I always default to a lower carb paleo template, but then fine tune it for you. And then once you have it fine tuned, then every 4 or 5 days you can cycle in and out. And remember, earn your carbohydrate. The more exercise you do, the more weightlifting you do, the more carbs you are going to need. So keep that in the back of your mind. Again, resistance training is going to be glycolytic a lot of times, meaning you're going to be breaking down and utilizing more glucose. So keep that in the back of your head. I'm going to go for some more questions here. Let's see here. Best diet for celiac is a paleo or ketogenic diet. Well, again, here off the bat, you can be paleo, right? Because paleo, forget the word diet, put paleo template. Now, template means the macronutrients are agnostic. So whether you're low carb or high carb, or moderate fat or high fat, or moderate protein or high protein on a paleo template, that's negotiable. So go for the paleo template, and then just bring your carbohydrates down by just focusing on non-starch veg, up the protein, up the fat, right? Additional fat from coconut, animal-based fats, maybe some nuts and seeds as well. And then just make sure the meats that you're eating are full fat meats, and you're just not doing a ton of protein powder, or if you are, you're adding some fats to it, and then you'll be in a great shape. All right, so question here off the bat. I donated a kidney a few years back. Does that mean I only have one adrenal gland? If so, does that put more stress on my existing adrenals? Will this affect my ketosis activation? That's an awesome question, by the way. I would imagine that your general surgeon or your nephrologist, whoever did that surgery, I would be shocked if they pulled out your adrenals. They probably just left it hanging in there, which is kind of weird because the adrenals sit like a cap on top of the kidney. So I imagine they just pulled that kidney out and it's probably hanging there still. But I would ask your surgeon to confirm that. I would be shocked if they pulled out your adrenal gland. Typically pulling out healthy tissue like that would be kind of against the do no harm etiquette, so to speak. Let's see here. Any other questions that come in? All right, guys. So I'm going here. I'm going to keep on riffing. If you want to ask me some more things, this is just totally off the cuff. So if you want to throw some more things up there, I'll take a peek every minute or two. So let's kind of recap. We've gone over a lot of things. So we talked about what a ketogenic is, what a ketogenic diet is. We talked about the template version. We talked about how choosing food quality is great. We talked about cycling it. We talked about the ratios, 2 to 1, right? 2 times more fat than protein. We talked about really dialing in breakfast because we don't want our body to go into we don't want our body to have to use as much gluconeogenesis because that will cause us to use more cortisol. So people can derail themselves by doing too much protein on a ketogenic diet because they just need more cortisol to pump out that sugar. We really want to overdo the fat and the protein, hence the 2 to 1, hence the 2 to 1. We talked about supplements. We talked about how I do it and how I cycle it in and out. Now, the best thing about ketogenic diets is it can significantly help with cancer because a lot of cancer cells, not across the board, especially a lot of brain cancers do this, is they heavily rely on glucose for fuel. And we know this because PET scans or positron emission tomography tests, which they give you some radioactive glucose. They watch where that glucose goes because the cancer cells are grabbing it. So conventional medicine knows even at the radiological level that glucose is going to be consumed by these cancer cells. So doing your best to decrease the load of glucose. We also know that brain cancer cells also love glucose as well. So starving them out and having to rely more on ketones is so much better. Epilepsy is great. There's I think a movie with Meryl Streep. I think it's called Do No Harm maybe, but she's an epileptic son and they do a ketogenic diet and that significantly helps with epilepsy. That's actually in the scientific literature. You can go as far back as 1920s, Mayo Clinic writing about ketogenic diets and epilepsy. So quite profound there. Again, the big issue is a lot of people, they drive in inflammation by consuming grains, number one, and by jacking up their insulin levels. So by just lowering your insulin levels, you're decreasing advanced glycation end products, which are basically your creme bruleeing all the tissue in your body. That browning effect that you get in the creme brulee with the blowtorch on the cream, that same thing's happening in your body with advanced glycation end products. Okay, so that's huge, huge, huge. So you're decreasing inflammation via advanced glycation end products. You're decreasing free radicals, which are basically coming in and chipping away electrons, chipping away electrons in your body, which is going to make things more unstable, right? Oxidative stress is nothing more than the rusting of a nail outside your body. It's the rusting of your tissue internally. We're also cutting out the grains just because. So when Atkins did the low carbohydrate stuff in the 70s, he got a lot of things right by accident. Because when you go ketogenic or low carb, you just cut certain things out just because of the carb content. And some of those things like grains have some irritating inflammatory effects to them. They're higher in mycotoxins. There's more lectins and phytates and oxalates and all these mineral disruptors. They're high in gluten, which can create leaky gut and have this molecular mimicry autoimmune thing. So Atkins got a lot of things right. The problem with Atkins is he said, oh, hey, aspartame, that's okay. Oh, organic? That doesn't matter that much. Hormones, Now, again, Atkins would probably have updated a lot of this stuff today, but when we talk about like a low carb, when we talk about a paleo template that's low carb, what we're doing is we're differentiating ourselves from Atkins because we're kind of cutting out the artificial sweeteners, right? We're cutting out the hormones and the antibiotics. We're focusing on grass-fed. We're focusing on organic. So we're adding a couple of qualifiers to what the food quality is, not just the quantity macro-wise, but we're also looking at the micro-wise too. All right, here, any other questions off the bat? Let's see what we can do. What do you think about adding in CoQ10 during ketosis? I think that's great. CoQ10 is used in the electron transport chain. It's really a powerful nutrient used by the mitochondria to generate more energy. I think that's awesome. What does your daily meal plan look like? What supplements do you take? Oh, great question. So today I had 2 to 3 eggs. My wife made the quiche, so I had some grass-fed, some sausage in there, and about 2 or 3 eggs. So I had that for breakfast. I also had some coffee with about 10 to 12 grams of collagen in it. I had a tablespoon of MCT oil and a tablespoon of butter. That was my breakfast. So I got maybe, my breakfast consisted of about 30 to 35 grams of protein. I probably had double the fat and very little carbohydrate. From that, my lunch, I think I have some kielbasa. I have some broccoli I'm going to cook up. I'm going to put the kielbasa on the grill, and I'll do some sauerkraut. And then for dinner, I'm going to go pop on to Instacart right now and order some ribeye steaks for my wife and I. We'll probably do some green beans or a nice salad. And then tonight, I will probably cut up a green apple, and I'll probably do some dark chocolate as my dessert. I'll also have a ginger kombucha at lunch today because it's Friday. I'm gonna rock out and cheat a little bit. Only 2 grams of sugar on that. A lot of other kombuchas are very, very high in sugar, like a soda. So try to choose the right sources that have the lower sugar content. So I try to be within about 50, maybe 75 grams of carbohydrate. Today, I may do just some push-ups and maybe a quick Tabata, but I walked already 6 miles today. I'll get about 10 by the end of the day. So I'm not worried about exercising that much because I walk 10 miles. I walk about 60 to 70 miles a week seeing patients. So I feel pretty good about that. Oh, awesome. Thanks about the collagen. Yeah, the True Collagen is a great product. I hope you guys enjoy it. Collagen peptides, grass-fed, organic, and it mixes great in the coffee. Beef collagen mixes the best. The collagen peptides really blend good. I used to do chicken collagen in my coffee. Not nearly as good. Totally destroys the coffee. All right, so anything you guys want to hear about the ketogenic diet stuff, let me know. I'm going to close up in about 1 minute if I don't hear anything else. So we talked about the different diseases. We talked about blood sugar stability, because when you're not relying on sugar for your fuel, it's like putting logs on a fire. When you create a campfire, if you put logs on that fire is going to burn long and strong. Okay. Now you may put a little bit of kindling in there to start the fire and get the logs going, but picture putting kindling in without the logs. You're constantly having to light the kindling every couple of minutes because the fire goes out. Now that fire going out, that's analogous to blood sugar swings. So when your blood sugar swings, the fire goes up and then out, up and then out. When your mood goes up, your mood goes down. Your brain fog goes up, your brain fog goes down, right? So all these things are going to be thrown off by your blood sugar. As your blood sugar goes, so your mood goes. So if we put kindling, actual kindling and logs in that fire versus just the small paper and twigs, we're going to have a more sustainable fire. So burning more fat for fuel, that's like putting logs in the fire. So think of that analogy. I like to eat about every 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 hours. If you get a big enough breakfast and you don't have a lot of adrenal issues, you could go up to 6 hours if you get enough calories in the morning. Here's the thing though. Ketosis is a natural state. All right, there's nutritional ketosis, which is kind of your body goes into that fasting physiology of burning fat for fuel, but it doesn't go into a caloric deficit. That's the difference between nutritional ketosis versus going into ketosis because of starvation. I can also go low calorie and starve myself and go into ketosis too. The difference is the grass-fed meat and the egg yolks and the grass-fed butter and all the nutrients I'm eating have calories in it. And they also have nutrients in it, like I said. So your body's not going to be becoming, that of, like, say, a concentration camp victim would be. You're actually supporting yourself. So a lot of people that you hear talk bad about ketosis, they get it wrong because they think of ketosis from a ketosis physiology of starvation. The difference is your body can do that same thing and be in nutritional ketosis because you're actually getting nutrients coming in because those nutrients are attached to calories. That's the big difference. Again, apple cider vinegar I think is great. Apple cider vinegar has a high amount of acetic acid in there. It can flush out a lot of the guanidine residue for protein metabolism. A lot of people get derailed on ketogenic diets. This is huge. I almost forgot it. I can't believe it. Shame on me. If you have more fat and more protein in your diet, guess what more stress is put on? Guess what organs the stress is put on now? So they put more on the digestive organs because now more hydrochloric acid and enzyme is needed. And if your body's really in a fight or flight and a lot of adrenal stress happening, you got the sympathetic nervous system happening. And what happens is the fight or flight takes all your blood flow and puts it into your extremities so you can fight and fight, so to speak. fight and flight, and that blood moves away from your organs. Now you need the blood in the organs so you can make the hydrochloric acid and the enzymes. So really getting that parasympathetic nervous system response, better breathing, good hydration, sleeping good, all of the foundational functional medicine factors are going to help put you into that parasympathetic nervous system state. That's going to drive the hydrochloric acid secretion and the enzymes. So if you're eating a lot of protein or eating more fat too, let's say moderate protein, high fat, and you're not feeling as good, or you're feeling bloated or gassy or constipated, right? What you can do is take some supplemental apple cider vinegar. You can take some hydrochloric acid and or enzymes so you can break that food down better. Now you're going to be able to break it down and utilize it and absorb it and assimilate it so much better. You can also up the carbs a little bit to, veggie carbs, just to feed that gut bacteria, maybe to add some bulk to that stool in case you get constipated. You can also play around with a little bit of magnesium citrate too. So those are some big factors that you can add in, and also the big factors that can derail a lot of people. They're like, hey, I just don't like animal products. I feel like crap. It's like, yeah, what that told me was your weak link is in your digestive system. You have low hydrochloric acid and low enzyme. So again, this is Dr. J here signing off. Oh, one more question. Will ox bile and HCl affect the feedback loop? No. Gastrin is the major feedback loop for hydrochloric acid secretion in the stomach, and gastrin does not disrupt the HCl feedback loop. There's studies on that. So I hope that helps, guys. If you're dealing with digestive issues or mood issues or hormone issues, or want to get dialed in with your diet and such, click below on the video and make sure you subscribe. Share this video with one person. Make sure you subscribe, because we're going to do more videos coming your way. And you guys have an awesome weekend. Take care. Bye.